So first of all, thank you, Teresa and Innova, for the invitation to work on this event together. And of course, thank you to Lawrence and Charlotte for agreeing to take part. I'm just going to say a couple of words about Electra, and then Fatima will tell you a little bit about the plan for the evening. So together, Fatima and I run an organisation called Electra, which was actually set up 10 years ago, more or less, to this very week. And Electra was initially founded to enable a project called Her Noise to take place. Oh, is that too loud?
No.
Okay. So Her Noise was, and is, it's an ongoing project, an inquiry into the histories of sound, performance, and experimental music in relation to gender. And it's become an ongoing archival project, the Her Noise Archive, and also a foundational project for Electra that in many senses most of our other work relates to. And the reason I particularly mention Her Noise is that it was in working on making the archive more formal following its initial exhibition at South London Gallery in 2005 that we encountered Sonia Boyce's devotional series. And if you're not familiar with that project, the devotional series is a project that seeks to recall collective memories of Black British female singers. So in the exhibition here at Innova, you can see the archive and also one of the works, O Adelaide. So last year, we actually invited Sonia to take part in a symposium, Her Noise, Feminisms in the Sonic, that we organised at Tate Modern. And so when Teresa approached us about working on this event in the framework of Sonia's exhibition, we were really delighted.
Yeah, so I'm going to mention a little bit about the evening, and then you also have program notes. So if you're interested in reading more about Charlotte and Lawrence, it's in there as well. So this event, talking about artists making records, takes its title from an article by Judith Hellberg that she wrote in 1982 for High Performance magazine. And in this, she plays with this double meaning of the record, both as a sound storage medium, but also as something more ephemeral, a form of witness or trace. And I think in the conversation tonight, this is something that will come back. So the way in which we're going to do this is that we're going to have a conversation with Charlotte and Lawrence, and then open up the floor at the end as well, so hopefully we'll have a bit more of a conversation. And it's worth mentioning that we've worked in the past, both with Charlotte and Lawrence, and we were quite keen to build on those conversations and talk about the sonic in relation to more specific works and research, rather than kind of approaching it in the abstract. So to bring it back to more specific concerns. And some of the questions that we're going to return to this evening is the question of materiality and subjectivity and where that sits with sound. And also questions of appropriation and design and how one can manipulate that through the sonic, as well as what one might want to call a form of politics of listening. So those are all things that will come out. So I would like to start by just handing over to Charlotte, who will be showing a video work and talking a little bit, and then we're going to have a bit of a conversation about her work before moving on to Lawrence.
Okay, hello. Am I? Yeah, I'm on. So I'm going to just show a 10-minute video, which is a single-screen preview version of an video and audio tape installation. The piece is called : asterisk, but that's how I say it, but the title is actually a colon, a hyphen, and asterisk. So I'll just show the video, and then I'll show you the video after I've shown you some installation shots, just to put it in context. So it was made for a show in this gallery called Intermedia, in the CCA in Glasgow, and so there's five components to the work. There's 2 Hanterex monitors and 25-inch monitors, and on each of them plays a ripped YouTube video by a YouTube user called Night Classics. I don't know him, I just ripped his YouTube videos. And they alternate, so they're not, there's no like syncing device or anything, but just one of them I put like black at the start, which is the same length as the other video, and then one of them has black at the end, so they go like that. And then, so that's them, and then Lawrence, do you mind moving on to the next? Thank you. And then another component is a boom box, which sits over the other side of the room, and it's a Sharp GF777 boombox. This is actually 767, which I've used when the piece was shown in New York. There's a 10-minute audio piece, which is playing from an audio cassette, and the audio cassette has to be turned over manually every 30 minutes by the invigilators. And then, Lawrence, could you, thanks. Then this is, there's also on the wall, attached to the wall is a regular 8mm film splitter, which was is an obsolete device from an obsolete material, which was regular 8 film, which was an economical way of using 8mm film where you would shoot. You had to shoot it in a special camera. It would shoot down one side, and then you'd take the spool out, flip it, it would shoot down the other side. The lab would then split it and put it end to end. And so that's, could we have the next? Thank you, Lawrence. That's on the wall up there. You can just see it down there, and there's the boom box. And then, can we have the next one? Thanks. Beside the door is a stack of risograph transcripts, which are A3 folded into quarters. And this is a transcript of the audio tape that people can take away with them. So yeah, I'll show you the video now. I don't normally show it like this. It's just for preview purposes. And it's 11 minutes. Thank you.
Black Superstars and Black Puma Socks, uploaded by Trainers and Socks Forever on September the 2nd, 2008. Black Superstars and White Puma Socks, uploaded by Trainers and Socks Forever on September the 2nd, 2008.
Disco branched off infinitely, stripping down to form minimalist techno, maxing up to form provincial house. On afternoons off, I smoked weed with a Walkman on and walked in the forest behind the Wimpy estate. The northeast winter sun was high. It shoved shafts of white light between the equidistant pines.
Our new Nike BWs, uploaded by Nike Classics on February the 15th, 2009. 4 minutes, 22 seconds.
Light tree, light tree, light tree, light. On weekends, I danced in Aberdeen to Detroit techno. Intelligent techno. Middle partings, white denim, snowball ecstasy. Each track moving like one crashing wave into the next. Everything was moving forward, but always with the illusion of standing still.
Description. In this video, you can see my BF and me in the same kind of Nike Classics, sizes Euro 45 and Euro 42. Can you read the messages?
Homos and Light. Monday, 30th of March, 2009, 1449. From Anna Tetzlaff to Charlotte Prodger. Okay, C, here it comes. Sorry, I'm just going to write it down without fine-tuning it to the golden rules of storytelling, if that's all right. I'm just going to spit it out. Hope you can do with it. Kiss, 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 kiss. Lucy and me got up early, showered, and went to go raving in Friedrichshain. As we arrived, a slow flow of men came out of the club, calling it a day. It was still going, though. A lot of gay sex happening around you. Little corners everywhere. Bear types dancing inwardly to hard beats in near darkness. It's apparently the best PA in Europe. The music was quite hard, but I remember liking it and being somewhat insecure as I wasn't too familiar with the codes of the dance floor. The special feature of the bar is its windows that are hung with shutters. Anyway, I remember dancing and the DJ doing his climactic tricks and the crowd going strongly and the music getting louder and then sunny daylight streaming into the room. Periodically, someone was climbing up, reaching out and teasing open one of the blinds with his fingers. He started opening and closing them rhythmically, and it was pure ecstasy when he let them open for longer moments, disrupting the imperative of the music, an invitation to stand still.
Swapping Trainers. Uploaded by Trainers and Socks Forever on September the 13th, 2008. Description. We sat down and enjoyed touching our trainers and socks. Climber Cool, size 45, UK 10.5, and Air Max 90, size 42, UK 7.5. Finally swapping them. 4 minutes, 19 seconds.
Interesting. This is a swap of trainers between people. Samuli 9, 1 year ago. What the fuck is this? Skringov, 2 years ago. Two guys swapping trainers. Trainers and Socks Forever, 2 years ago. This video really grabs me. So the other guy wore size 42. What size are yours? Kakula 512, 2 years ago. What the fuck? Why did you do this? Emmanuel, 2 years ago. What the fuck? Why did you watch it? Trainers and Socks Forever, 2 years ago.
Homos and Light. Tuesday, 5th of May, 2009, 21:40. From Lucy Cran to Charlotte Prodger. Hi Charlotte, sorry it's taken me so long to reply. I remember it like this. We went in there about 9 a.m. There were 2 rooms. One was more housey, one was like the hardcore bear room with minimalist techno, which we kind of liked. We preferred it because it seemed more foreign. And it was in this place that there was windows covered with blinds. It was a sunny morning, so light was seeping in from around the blinds a bit, and everyone was facing them, dancing to them more than to the DJ. They were those slatty blinds, and every now and then a couple of the slats would be raised. The DJ must have had a remote for them or something, because they had that brilliant timing that electronic things have. Different slats would open, and everyone would cheer as the light came in. Then it would be closed again, and another one opened, etc. It would be off the menu for a while, then come back again. I liked this pagan business. Tell me if you need more detail, Lucy.
Did you keep each other's Nikes after swapping? Celebrity Cruise 21, 1 year ago. Hot vid. The guy who got the Air Max 90 got the better deal. Lol's Curwen, 2 years ago. Fakes. Mudboy UK, 3 years ago. Day Fakes. Lol. Gold Toe Metro Guy, 3 years ago. Lol. They defo ain't fakes. Trainers and Socks Forever, 3 years ago. If they ain't fakes, then keep flexing with them. Gold Toe Metro Guy, 3 years ago.
These words are looping. I'll turn this tape over when it finishes. The same thing is on the other side. It's a double cassette deck. And when this tape is done, I'll press play on the next one. It's a copy of this one.
Tags. Sneakers, trainers, turnschuhe, Nike, Air Max, BW, Classic, Air Max, Destroy, Kill, Cut, Pop, Zesturen, Exchange, Swap.
Tags. Sneakers, trainers, turnschuhe, Nike, Air Max, BW, Classic, Air Max, Destroy, Kill, Cut, Pop, Zesturen, Exchange, Swap.
Tags. Trainers, sneakers, Adidas, Nike, Air, Max, Climber, Cool, Exchange, Swap, Gay, Socks, Soccer, Trackies, Sneaks, White, Worn, Play.
Tags. Trainers, sneakers, Adidas, Nike, Air, Max, Climber, Cool, Exchange, Swap, Gay, Socks, Soccer, Trackies, Sneaks, White, Worn, Play.
On its first pass through the camera, the 16mm film is only exposed along half of its width. When the first pass is complete, the camera is opened, the spools are flipped and swapped, and the same film is then exposed along its other edge. After processing, the film is cut all the way down the middle, resulting in 2 lengths. These are then attached end to end, creating 1 length. This is known as regular 8, or standard 8, or double 8.
Very nice. Love the slipping. Just what I love to see. Mateus Sneak 6 years ago. Nice place and video. You should kick that wall. It would be nice. Please. Supermass Art 2 months ago. Can you make a video with your Nike BWs when you're kicking on something? Like kicking a wall? Supermass Art 2 years ago. You should pop 'em. Nike Slicer 3 years ago. Should both play in the mud or water in those Nikes and trackies too. Squash each other's Nikes into the water. Wet Rev 2 years ago. Should have thrown them into the lake water and put them wet back on your sock feet. Wet Rev 2 years ago.
Everything was moving forward, but always with the illusion of standing still. But I had to take a step backward musically to take a step forward in another way. So I went with Kay and his friend to an old school gay club down by the port. It felt good, but I wasn't used to dancing to music which wasn't seamless. Here, each song was a separate unit. The first time I ever went to Glasgow, from Aberdeen, was in Kay's car in 1992. We were going to Club X. Halfway, we stopped at Stracathro Services. I sat in the car while he went into the men's toilets. He emerged sometime later, turning his signet ring, a habit, and said to me, "Those toilets are always good. Lots of men." Recently I read that when Donna Summer's I Feel Love was released, David Bowie burst into Brian Eno's studio and said, "I've just heard the future," and played him the record. The sign means you may go a lot further and do a lot worse. I'm writing this on the bus from Glasgow to Aberdeen. I'm listening to Jean-Michel Jarre's Magnetic Fields 5. The bus has just passed the John Deere Centre where the new tractors are lined up and will soon pass Stracathro Motorway Services. There is a large sign above Stracathro Services, instantly recognisable to the passing traffic. The sign reads, "Ye may gang for and fair war." The sign means, you may go a lot further and do a lot worse.
Nike Air Prestige High 13, uploaded by Nike Classics on July the 14th, 2011. Description: last cut.
Thank you. Should we maybe start with some questions, actually, and turn it into conversation more? Something that I've been thinking a lot about seems to be this ongoing interest in your work in structuralist film and materialism and quite formal approaches to the medium. But at the same time, there's always this kind of element of subjectivity and there's both formal and messiness at the same time. And I was interested in hearing a bit more about that form of approach.
Yeah, so I think something that I'm something that I'm doing in my, particularly I guess in my moving image work, is working through my ambivalent relationship to structuralism and structurist film and minimalism. And I kind of have this pushing and pulling relationship with those forms. And so I guess I kind of move around these historical forms, but trying to kind of infuse them or like rub them up infuse them with or rub them up against queer subjectivity. And playing with the tension between language and material in some way. And something which I think that comes up a lot in my work is this idea of evolution on different kind of levels. So I keep reusing this kind of reconfiguring and jumbling up and reusing this Bernard Stiegler quote, which is about this Paleolithic relationship between language and techniques. So this, how, language and becoming upright, bipedal, happened simultaneously and were totally symbiotic in their relationship to each other. Techniques, using tools and language were totally symbiotic and coincided with becoming upright. So the hand was freed from being on all fours, and the mouth was freed from grasping, and so the mouth was able to, and then tools, the hand held tools and the mouth named them, and so it went on. And I'm very fascinated by that idea and that moment, and keep kind of wanting to kind of recontextualize that in terms of experiences now, and kind of really vernacular experiences. So a lot of my work is about dancing to minimalist techno, for example. And there's this moment that I keep rewriting, which is, it's a formative moment in terms of my own the evolution of my own queer identity, which is that growing up in Aberdeen, and I used to go clubbing. I was kind of a bedroom DJ, and I used to go clubbing to these minimalist techno clubs, and it was all like progressive house and intelligent techno, and I really like those terms, evolutionary kind of terms. But in order to kind of be gay, I had to go, those clubs were amazing. They were really elegant, beautiful drugs, beautiful clothes, amazing music, but totally hetero. So in order to...
This was in Aberdeen?
Yeah. So I was about 19. And then I was working with this guy at an old people's home. He was my only gay friend. He was like an older queen. And I went to a gay club with him, and it was shite. It was good, I loved it, but the music was trashy, vocal garage. And we weren't on drugs, and we faced each other when we danced, rather than at the other club where everyone faced forward. And so it was this kind of idea of stepping backwards in terms of taste in order to move forward in terms of what I had to do. Kind of stepping backward, I suppose, into language. And there's another thing in terms of all of that, which is that thinking about the Hantarex monitors, video monitors that I use, so thinking about like TV sets used to give a body to, they used to give a head and shoulders to what would otherwise be flat and ephemeral. And I was talking to my friend Matt about this. And but with YouTube, the endlessness of online content is becoming flatter and flatter, and the body is changing. And I find that quite exciting. Someone once suggested that about this piece, someone once suggested in a review that I was intimating in this piece that we're becoming, through the internet, via the internet, we're becoming alien. The self is becoming alienated from the body, and that's why we seek stimulation in these iconic, high consumerist objects. But I actually, I don't think that the self is becoming alienated from the body via the internet. I think the body is changing. And I find, and the self is changing, and from a queer perspective, that excites me in terms of intimacy and this kind of becoming more diffused in a way, not weaker, just more simultaneous. I'm really interested as well in the way that language is mediated via these evolving online structures. So like image grids and forums and tag clouds and these typologies that happen when desire is kind of conflated with technology. And I'm interested in that in terms of, because these systems, they're very containing, they contain language. But they also, I mean, obviously, because through anonymity, they can facilitate a much more intimate relationship with others. And that I find quite exciting as well. And recently I was telling you the other day, I had a row with an eBay seller about, I bought a synthesizer on eBay, and there was a big hoo-ha with the postage, and it was late and everything, and we had a row, me and the seller. And I don't know, I was just quite interested in the sequencing of the row, because it was on messages on eBay. And there's kind of, these chunks, and it's very ordered sequencing. And within that was like the mess of communication, these kind of entanglements. And I'm interested in that tension.
Interesting.
Could you maybe speak about the relationship between sound and image in your work? Because often they're separate or even sort of alternating.
Yeah. So in another piece that I made, Hand Clap Punch Hole, they are alternating. It's tricky to describe it, but so it's someone in Sherborne Abbey, this kind of queer figure, a friend in Sherborne Abbey, wheeling around this mirror trolley that's used to look. It's part of the Abbey, and it's quite common in these kind of buildings to have this mirror trolley which enables you to look at the ceiling without getting a crick in your neck. And it's a very beautiful, ornate medieval ceiling that just narrowly escaped the Reformation. They couldn't reach it, really, so that's why, to rip it down, so that's why it remained. And I was interested in and I was kind of juxtaposing this with Tony Conrad's 1965 minimalist film, The Flicker. So I sort of, the film has sections alternating, which is like an image of the person, Isabel, in the Abbey, wheeling the trolley around, then black, then an image of Isabel, then white, then an image of Isabel, then black, then an image of Isabel, then white. But the black and white sections are like about a minute long. Well, they're dictated by the length of the dialogue. And so I was kind of took Tony Conrad's Flicker, and I didn't remake it, I appropriated it, and like stretched it out so that the frames, because his film, The Flicker, is alternating black and white frames, and I wanted to kind of stretch it out so that it became like these columns, because that space, obviously, it's very architectural kind of piece. And anyway, the film is silent in that piece because celluloid is inherent. It was 16 millimeter I shot it on, and 16 mil is inherently a silent medium. And so in that piece also, that the film was in the gallery showing on a 16 mil looper, and then there was a boombox, the previous version of the boombox, the 767, was in the gallery. And because that boombox is was designed in 1982 to drown out all other boomboxes on the street. It's like the holy grail of boomboxes, and it's renowned for its throw rather than its volume. So in that situation, in the gallery, it was competing with like the sound of the projector, the looper, which was rattling away as they do showing a silent film. The other thing with that...
That competition was an intentional choice to set that up.
Yeah. And the other thing is that separating these elements out spatially, like in this piece, like the individual monitors and the boombox, brings something anthropomorphic to the technology. It allows me to think of each object as characters in a way, and play with the relationships between them. So, for example, in this piece, Night Classics is inside one Hunter-X monitor, and he and his boyfriend, Trainers and Socks Forever, are inside the other Hunter-X monitor, but just their hands and feet. I've never seen his face. You don't ever see his face in his videos. And then my voice is on the boombox across the room, and so are the voices of two male friends of mine, and they're speaking other people's words. So a lot of the time, this kind of disconnect is somehow to do with my relationship, I guess, with masculinity and kind of being inside and outside of something. Maybe I'll come back to that later a bit.
There seems to be a form of also like a coding there, like in terms of Flickr as a form of code, and also looking at these codes like trainers and socks in the form of modes in which syntax has kind of been put into a structure. And it's interesting to hear, like, for instance, in this film, how that also merges with a form of cultural expression of like not knowing what the dance floor code is. And it's interesting to see how you're not necessarily only appropriating music per se, but it's like the codes and the form of rules that sometimes are unspoken that's so much a part of how we define music per se in terms of those forms of structures.
Yeah. So thinking about clubbing in particular, because you know that I work as a DJ for a job. That's how I, pay my rent. And so every month I kind of look at people dancing. I really like looking at people dancing. It's nice to be because when you're DJing, you're kind of invisible. You can really watch people, and they don't really realize you're watching them. Sounds creepy, but it's not. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's nice. And thinking I do think kind of formally about sound and light in clubs as the kind of pulsating, as a kind of syntax where communication's broken down into these fragments, because you can't speak to each other really because it's so loud. So there's this coding. So there's like we were talking about, even just like, do you want a drink? Do you want a drink? Is like a code that's very familiar, but also in a queer sense, there's this kind of sexual coding that I sort of touch upon quite often, and the cruising. And so in that story, I'm going to come back to it, but that story that Anna's here, and that Anna told me about going to Bergen and dancing and enjoying it, being like minimalist techno bears, really enjoying the kind of otherness of it in a way, but also as queer people being like part of it, but also because it's a kind of male cruising culture, feeling half in and out. So there's this idea of access and denial that I am interested in, and I use a lot, particularly in relation to queer male cruising. The codes of the dance floor. And I've touched upon that again in another piece. Percussion by Phase 1 to 13, and there's a small section in that in which I transcribed a tiny part of a documentary that I saw about the nightclub CBGB's, and it was shot back in the late 70s, and it's really like cock rock. It's all like the Ramones, and it's very very like male in its references, although Lydia Lunch is in it. But there's one tiny, inconsequential seeming interview in it, which just lasts for like 30 seconds with a barmaid and at CBGB's, and she's talking about how her and the other barmaid, it's so, because they weren't, that level of amplification was new to everyone. That people were just like, had never experienced that before. And so it was so loud that her and the other barmaid, she's talking about how her and the other barmaid have had to evolve in order to, very quickly on the job, in order to be able to communicate with each other. And she says how other people come in and they're like, what? They can't hear each other in the club. But she says me and Maureen can speak perfectly. with each other. And I really like that little casual moment, but like casual, like nothing thing, but actually about something quite huge, this evolving language.
But it also feels like that form of centrality of the technology and kind of not trying to hide it is something that comes back pretty much in all your exhibitions, where the Hunter-X monitor, with the boombox, with the speakers, all of them are these kind of material and sculptural elements that are allowed to kind of be there. There's not a form of embarrassment or trying to kind of make them small or go away, but they're pieces of architecture almost.
Yeah, I like them. I like them, and I do get really into that. And I think that because I have thought about this quite a lot, because I didn't do a foundation course, and so I feel like there's something missing in my kind of visual language as an artist. And for example, I would really love to, but I just can't. Like, I'm not someone that goes into the studio and goes, I'm going to play with this material and like see what happens, like out of process. I would like to do that, but I just can't. It's like I'm missing the vocabulary. And so I think that, getting bespoke cables made and, tying cables in particular, using cable ties in particular way at the back of the monitors where you can see them, and using these Hunter-X monitors that are kind of like black monoliths is a way of me making sculpture. And I think that's me making sculpture. And also in terms of I am very fetishistic about those things, and the technology has a similar aesthetic for me. Those technological objects are similar in their aesthetic to sportswear, which I'm also really interested in and into. In the aesthetics are kind of defined by the functionality, so it's about paring everything back so it's hyper-functional, but that's kind of really beautiful, like these materials that are constantly being evolved, New skins they make, don't they, in sportswear. And
Just thinking about the time, maybe if we have one or two more questions then.
Yeah.
Move on.
Do you want to ask a final thing before we move on to...
I was going to ask about, but maybe you have questions, but...
Afterwards, maybe?
Okay, yep. So I was going to ask about the people. I mean, you were talking about how these objects also, in a way, embody or anthropomorphize, and it feels like a lot of your work is populated by friends or people who have been friends, and then there's these other figures like Nike Classics, and so it would be interesting to hear you talk about that. Is that a sense of community, and also in relation to appropriation?
yeah. So maybe the friends first. So I think the thing is that I do use anecdotes a lot in my work, and they've just come like naturally over the years, as they do, and I tend to squirrel them. I squirrel them away a bit, and I'm interested in the way that the anecdotes, mutate in syntax and content as they travel through time and space, and they become versions of themselves. And I'm interested in people as versions of themselves in a way as well. And so, for example, with the anecdotes, so going back to Anna, who's that anecdote about dancing in the club and the blinds and the light coming through the window, where it had come about years and years ago when we were chatting on we used to chat on MSN. Anna lived in Berlin and I lived in London. We used to talk on MSN, and we liked it, the MSN. I think it was a good way. I don't know, it's fast and you miss a lot of stuff. There's all these slippages because the answer popped up and you don't know what it's the answer to because the time's, and then blah blah blah, and so she had told me that story, and then it kind of stayed with me. She told me it really casually. It was like, what did you do at the weekend? oh, well, we did this. And then I asked her and her then girlfriend, Lucy, to a few months later, to separately email me their, maybe even like a year later, to separately email me their recollections of it, and they differed. And so then I amalgamated them to make this piece on 16mm film called I Was Confused About the Dance Floor Code. And then in making this piece, a couple of years after that, or a year after that, I used the raw emails, just the text from the 2 raw emails. So I guess this piece has been through different material. This anecdote has been through different materials: paper, film, and audio tape. And I'm interested in those materials because they mutate as through time, like language. And then there's also another social dimension to my work, which is, we were chatting about this, which is, it isn't seen, and I'm sure this is the case for a lot of artists. It isn't seen, but it's very important to me, and in a way it's quite intimate and vulnerable, which is that every time I make a piece of work, I have to talk to certain friends about it, because to get them into the studio and show them and go, what do you think? Is it shy? You know, what should I leave this out? You know, what? And for me, that's really, really crucial part of my process, and I can't do it. I can't do it on my own. And so in a way, I guess I'm just highlighting by saying that the contingency of the process. And sometimes these same friends' voices will end up in the work reading for me, and they'll be like reading the voices of strangers from internet forums, or reading anecdotes about friends from years ago that they've never met and that I'll probably won't see again. So I guess it's quite dispersed. If it's community, I'm not sure. I don't know about the word community, but some kind of dispersed. These relationships are shifting a lot.
Mm. And what about someone like Nike Classics? Is he in that scheme, or?
Well, I have an affection for him, for his videos, you know. But I don't know him, and I thought of contacting him.
Nike Classics, the person.
The guy who makes these videos. So at the time that I was making these this piece, I was really, you know how it is, very busy, like up against it, and I was like, I really must contact him. I felt that I should contact him and tell him. And then the time passed, but at that point, my head was so full of, you know, I had a lot going on that it wasn't the right time I couldn't really handle the idea of having someone new in my life that I didn't know. Do you know what I mean? Like, who is he? I don't know even who he is, you know, or where he is. And so then the time passed. And the moment passed, and then now I kind of think, why? You know, right? You have to kind of know why you're contacting, in order to tell him why you're contacting him. But I am vigilant about crediting the videos whenever I show the work. So, you know, and also I think if he Googled his username, I think he could know that this has happened. You know, and he says, you know, when he makes his videos, he makes a lot of videos, a lot. There's, you know, hundreds of them on his YouTube channel, and it's all the same thing. It's all trainers, and when he says, please comment, he always says that. So this is my way of commenting.
I think maybe that's a nice place to end for now. And then thanks. And then we could have a little bit of a chat with Lawrence as well.
Okay. Thanks very much for having me here and inviting me. It's really nice.
Yes, thank you.
I'm going to talk about 2 projects that are connected. They're 2 parts of a trilogy. And then I think we're going to open up for some questions. But I'll start here. So You don't actually need to dim the lights, it's fine. I've been working on this project since 2010 called Oral Contract with an AU. And it's manifests itself in a lot of different ways, mostly speaking, installations, a kind of huge audio track list, and also a series of audio documentaries, which I finished 2 of them now, and I'm working on the 3rd one. So what Oral Contract is doing is looking at the role of voice in law. So actually very much relating to sort of understanding why we sort of testify, why is the necessity of the kind of speaking aloud in the process of justice, process of finding the truth, let's say. Why it's so important that speech is part of it. And why is there this kind of moment in every kind of building of every legislation that law is kind of spoken aloud and it's heard in a specific space. So it's really like the beginning of the project, and it kind of starts with audio like this, which when I heard it blew my mind.
The Honorable, the Chief Justice and the Associate Justices of the Supreme Court of the United States. Oh yea, oh yea, oh yea. All persons having business before the Honorable, the Supreme Court of the United States are admonished to draw near and give their attention, for the court is now sitting. God save the United States and this honorable court.
So in those like 4 seconds where he switches between speech and then into this call, this vocal call, oh yeas, oh yeas, oh yeas, that's really like where all of the research kind of leaves from, and is kind of could always return to that moment, because it's really about not only the kind of use of speech, but all the kind of excess that is also required in the process of justice, the kind of excess of language, or the kind of what happens when we use the kind of voice as a kind of vehicle for language, and all the kind of excess that is produced, and also why that excess is also again so necessary for the process, and why it's also there, you know. So this kind of shift between a call and speech happens constantly, and also happens within speech itself, which I will kind of talk about through these documentaries. So this and this also which is the MGM Lion, which is the first non-human vocal sound to be copyrighted. Those 2 tracks are part of this big track list, which functions like the sort of bibliography of the research of the project Oral Contract. So there's like about 40 something tracks that for me like. Each one developed its own kind of story around the kind of role of testimony, either today or as an institution in itself. So this is the track list as installed in Casco and in Utrecht. And here it's installed as a voice-activated system, whereby these Bosch microphones, the same Bosch microphones that are used in all the kind of legal forum, international legal forum. You can walk up to them and you say the title of one of these tracks, and there's a kind of pool of voices that is made out of this audio archive, and when you say the title of the track, the kind of pool of voices fades down, the track fades up, then it continues, and then at the end it falls back into this cacophony. And sometimes also it just completely rejects people, the system. And it's actually a misogynist, like few, like maybe, you know, one in 4 women get to speak to it, which is like this it's like at the root of it is this Dragon Dictate, this software, which people use to dictate to their computer. So this is a kind of like compositional tool. At the same time as kind of hearing the tracks, you also hear the sort of voice as it would be amplified in these legal forums. And you also kind of make a sort of forum in itself where there's these kind of 3 stations in which you hear each other. So it's a headphone work as well. And that's that. So that's how I'm doing it. And this started also here in London last January in the showroom with this exhibition called The Freedom of Speech Itself. And this is a picture of the exhibition. And so that leads me on to this audio documentary trilogy, which then sort of like the tracks from the archive are kind of mixed together, and the archive is also constituted by lots of interviews I've done with people, practitioners, legal practitioners, also people working in kind of the field, voice coaches for lawyers, people like forensic listeners. And then one of these tracks on the archive was something that turned into a sort of 30-minute, or the first 30-minute part of this audio documentary trilogy, which is called The Freedom of Speech Itself. And what it's about is that since 2001, the UK border agency and many other countries like Switzerland, Austria, Holland, Australia, started doing an accent test for asylum seekers who are coming to the UK. So they would basically, what they would do is they would give the phone to an asylum seeker, and this would be connected to a Swedish a company in Sweden, private company, who would then file a report, elicit speech from the asylum seeker, and then file a report afterwards saying where they were from or where they weren't from, based on their accent. It's extremely problematic and has led to the deportation and or rejection, which in this kind of, where you end up in this sort of limbo system of many people, and wrongfully so as well. And so what surprised me was this kind of, why I wanted to make this piece was because of the kind of idea of the voice being somehow a passport or like a birth certificate, where in fact it operates much more in a kind of slippery way than that, right? It's so much more contagious. There's so much more kind of excess. So this kind of like bureaucratic mapping of the voice, which is kind of linguistic as well, I mean, in terms of its science, hits me at odds immediately with the way I was thinking about voice anyway, as this kind of very slippery medium. So yeah, I mean, I can go into why it's more problematic later, but I'm sure just simply from the sound of it, you understand why it's problematic. And it's more than problematic. I actually hate this word problematic, which I keep using. But it's disgusting, is what it is. And the documentary focuses on the story of this guy, Muhammad, who was rejected for his pronunciation of the word tomato. And he was told he was Syrian rather than Palestinian, when Syrian meant you could go back somewhere, right? Now it doesn't really mean that. So this is so this was the syllable that the UK border agency designated as a Syrian national. And so they claim that its use in the word for the word tomato is coterminous with Syria's borders. It just ends at the border. And what was interesting for me is that finding, so he's Palestinian, and finding this kind of phoneme in a Syrian phoneme in a Palestinian's voice surely just said something more about Palestinians in general, right? So this idea that you would live a life in migration, right? And then it made me think that, of course, asylum seekers' accents kind of should be, in fact, if you're going to make any judgment on them, should be this kind of irregular and itinerant concoction of voices that is kind of produced from this lifetime in migration. And like everybody, produced by always a lot by the person you're immediately in contact with, i.e. someone in the phone in Syria, in Sweden, speaking with an Iraqi accent in this case. So the work has actually now also been, as well as part of these sound installations, recently, last time I presented it, in fact, was in an asylum tribunal, where I was asked some tough questions. And it was actually Muhammad's deportation hearing. So it might be interesting to talk about that later. But for now, this is how I've been showing it with these two voice prints, which you just saw kind of erased from the wall of the showroom, as these sculptural forms. So these are two voice prints. So on the bottom axis is time, and then this is volume, and this is frequency, right? So it's sort of like, you know, as the word progresses, as two people saying the word you. So this is one person saying you, this is the other person saying you. And they're made out of this like acoustic foam. So they also kind of intensify the space in which the documentary resonates, and kind of intensify the listening space. And these are voice prints that they, in fact, would use not in this Swedish company, but they use them in other forms of kind of forensic profiling of voices, in which they use this cartographic technique. So the kind of relationship between voice and defending sort of a national space or territory is made very clear there. Yeah, and these are more images of that. So when I then had the show in Casco, what we decided to do was, and I should hurry a bit, was to hold these kind of 2-day workshops where me and 12 Somali asylum seekers, all rejected because of their accents, met with linguists and graphic designers to produce a kind of series of alternative sort of voice maps, a kind of set of images which recognize or somehow intervene in the process, in the sense that for them the only mode of kind of speaking back to the system was use their voice. And of course the first thing that these accent tests do is kind of get rid of an idea that you want to speak out about them, right? Because as soon as you speak, you are listened to in a very different way, in a very intense way. So these are these maps that we produced, and hold on. And then we did this press conference where they were given to this judge from the immigration authorities in Holland, and this is her really awkwardly receiving them. And the funny, there's a good moment where she said, "Thank you very much, and I'm going to put these beautiful images in my kitchen." And then one of the Somali asylum seekers screamed from the back of the room, "Why don't you put it in your office?" And this was like a kind of like strange tension around where to put these images in her house. So the second piece, which was actually made for Casco, the second in the series of audio documentaries, was called The Whole Truth. And I'll go through really quickly because I think we're running out of time, right? It's about this new lie detector.
Good afternoon,
which,
ladies and gentlemen.
Uses the voice
2
as a
weeks
kind
ago,
of...
I reluctantly appeared before the TV cameras
it's just a
to defend
microphone and
myself
an
against
interface
the
like
bizarre
this.
allegations that were appearing about me in the news media dealing
And it
with
uses
last
the
year's
voice
anthrax
more as a kind of
attacks.
muscular index. So it has nothing to do with
These
geography. So in the first one it was a kind of
allegations were
geographical
fueled by
index.
ongoing
The
leaks from
second
the
one, it's
Justice
about the
Department,
voice as a kind of muscle,
and those leaks
as a body,
continue to this day.
which through its kind of tensions and like...
Several days ago, the Justice Department representatives
well, essentially it's cords
confirmed to
that
the
tighten.
Associated Press
This system
there
can
was no
generate
evidence
apparently a
linking
series
me
of
to the anthrax
terms,
attacks.
or these series of verdicts.
Despite
And this is
this
being
lack of
used by the
evidence,
disability
I'm still hounded by the
agencies
FBI,
here in Harrow Council,
victimized in a
and
never-ending torrent
to
of
assess
leaks
people's
and general
benefit
innuendo
claims. And it's
from
also
the United
used
States Attorney General John Ashcroft,
in a
and
lot of
unnamed
insurance
others,
companies and
all of which
borders
has
now.
been
are starting to use it.
amplified and embellished by the media. This assassination.
So I met this guy who had reverse engineered the software in the documentary, and this is what a truth sounds like. So he was testing the thing with vowels, just simply vowels, and it's kind of molecular language, to show that it's nothing more than a kind of like horoscope, that it gives a kind of good answer, bad answer, and something in between. This is a lie. And this is a speeded up version of the entire documentary put through the lie detector. It's the harshest critique I ever received. because this outsmart function, which is really vicious, and a lot of overemphasizing, etc. So, and this is how it's shown, and it's all I need to say. So this is the lie detector in the background. That's it. So there's a third one coming.
Ooh.
These are the first two parts.
It's interesting that the two first ones have taken the forms of radio documentaries.
Yeah.
And there's also, in your work at Casco, there's also a process of a form of mapping and a form of also creating a level of clarity and almost like a scheme, which also to me is the radio documentary as a format tends to be didactic. And I was just interested in what it is about this form that draws you in.
Well, actually the maps, when you see them close, what we actually tried to do, which is a kind of like a legal thing, but what we tried to do is produce a map that did exactly the opposite of being didactic. It was something that showed the absolute unmappability of a situation. Right? So a voice which is in contact with so many other voices that in fact it's no longer possible to understand its origins. And like a history of Somalia that is so many migrations that mean that essentially every possible combination of a way of speaking can exist there. So actually they were more like these very kind of confusing images initially. But yeah, with the radio kind of like essay and documentary form, I'm not sure what it is about the didacticism that appeals to me, but it's more, I guess, they appeal to me as forms, definitely. You said, like, I worked with the radio producer for the same one for both of them, Russell Finch. And that whole, I mean, because the project is about kind of like listening, I wanted to kind of use a medium that was already kind of a form of listening, a form of consumption of audio that existed, and also to really inhabit that form in the sense of its amplification. So really in the sense, like, really understand like where the trajectory of a fade, you know, like how long it takes to come up, like how long you leave a voice untranslated for before it comes in. So all these kind of paradigms of like constructing an acoustic sort of argument, an acoustic thesis was super interesting. And yeah, I really learned a lot, and yeah, and really enjoyed it as a form. And also playing with it, of course. I mean,
yeah, because that's something I was going to say, because you use these seemingly objective kind of structures, but then there's also that fragility of the voice and the process whereby the format that you set up also kind of breaks down in the same way that the legal apparatus as a form desiring a level of objectivity and clarity and a level of truth continuously has these nervous tics and kind of inability to cope with itself, and in that sense starts moving into this violent registers of suppressing those idiosyncrasies and that form of excess of the voice.
Yeah, exactly. And no, I mean, that's, of course, when you just go to make an interview with someone, that you pick up so much other things, right? All this kind of excess, which usually they try to get rid of. So they loved working with me because every time someone clears their throat or something, their instinct is to immediately go to the thing and just cut it, right? But then like you have this kind of discussion around it, which they, of course, as like sort of very, or him as a radio producer is a really like sort of expert listener in a sense that I really enjoyed working with. But also in the sense that, let's say, if you take an example from freedom of speech itself, it ends with me becoming a woman vocally. So there's a long stretch of my voice and slowly I turn into a woman with this sort of like quite high-tech voice disguising software. And so yeah, it's really about understanding when you really try and talk about a kind of shift in listening between sort of listening to what someone's saying and their voice, right? Which is the kind of key political shift in these both these works, because that's what happens on the side of the law, right? So it's a kind of shift from not listening to what people are saying anymore, but listening to the sort of object quality of the voice. So when you do that, when you work with these radio and you work with these like fades and these processes of voice disguise and all these things that they have at their command, you also have the ability to make those kind of induce those shifts in listening on your audience. And I guess to do that somehow unsuspectingly, because there's a very comfortable sort of listening which you can do to audio kind of documentaries. So also, these kind of things in which one is kind of comfortable in a medium, but then also unsettled sort of slowly, I think is kind of interesting. Yeah.
How did you become interested in the law in the first place, and the courtroom or the testimony as a site for listening?
I think it's because I was working a lot with sound and listening before, and I was working with these kind of performances which would kind of try to activate the acoustics of spaces unwittingly. So I was often interested in something which no longer interests me, but trying to use sort of like the unexpectedness of acoustics, right? You know, the kind of idea that people never really paying that much attention to acoustics. When you show it to them, they sort of like see things differently, let's say. So there was those kind of projects, and then I began thinking about a space more, because it was so much to do with acoustics and spaces. I began thinking about spaces in which listening is intended and actually designed to do. And then the courtroom is the kind of perfect example of that, because, you know, just in the nature of it being a sort of hearing, right? And then I started going and seeing all the different types of listening that actually happen there. So you have the stenographers who I've also interviewed, who kind of go into this automatic pilot listening. So they find an architectural spot in the room, look at it, focus on it, and then somehow become this sort of emptied subject whereby language can go in, but they don't hear it as language, they hear it as individual phonetic fragments, because that's what they type on. Each of those things is not keys, it's a phoneme, right? So, and different combinations of them make it. So this is also like a sort of liturgical model, right, where you have the kind of organist, and then they're bragging that members of the jury can be one push and all these kind of things. So they go into this very specific listening. You have the kind of listening of the judge. You have this translation, which is always happening, of the lawyer between kind of language of layman and legal speech. And then, of course, you have all these kind of speech acts which initiate the whole thing, and which the whole thing needs and depends on in order to even function. So it seemed to me that those are spaces which are really like dynamic sources of kind of spaces of listening. And actually really badly designed for in those ideas, which is part of it, right? Maybe. I mean, a paranoid mind would say that it's kind of the bad acoustics of the courtroom is kind of designed as such. But the interesting thing for me also is when I finally was a witness for this guy's trial, I recorded it on my phone because I thought it's a good crit opportunity. And the first 2 minutes are all about how I should and shouldn't speak. I mean, I literally sat there, and then the judge starts telling me. And after sort of like 3 years doing this research, I was like, wow. Like, like it was just a really strange moment. So he said, like, speak loudly, speak clearly, speak slowly, and all these things. And then, like started sort of introducing. So he said, because the report is being made by the stenographer, so. And then, so you always had to kind of acknowledge this thing. And then they also said, of course, the thing which I'd already noticed, which the space between you and the judge is deceivingly large. That's why you have to speak loud. And that whole kind of gulf between the kind of judge and those who speak is also a kind of interesting acoustic space, I think. So yeah, it's a long way around of saying that's why I became interested in it.
It's interesting in this work as well. There's certain moments where you obviously show a lot of the work in gallery contexts at art institutions, but where there's also these moments when you cross over into what one might call, on the one hand, some form of investigative journalism, and on the other hand, there's also an activist potential. And where I was interested in that kind of way in which you're also stepping into a research that in that sense touches upon extremely urgent and violent questions of surveillance, urgent questions of freedom of speech, really, in a way that seems kind of where the art space can be a platform for it, but where it's also kind of overflowing into other areas as well.
Yeah. So there was this petition in the showroom as well, where visitors could sign. But also, I mean, again, what was interesting for me there is that it's you sign and it's still this kind of silent form of protest that's allowed for you, right? So there's no kind of giving the voice there in that sense, right? Where kind of giving the voice has changed. And there's all this kind of rhetoric around like speaking up and giving the voice and kind of the democratic sort of rhetoric, which I think is kind of also like empty, you know? So there was this petition there, and yeah, I mean, there is things. It's difficult though to properly do it. Of course, like I feel also that it's somehow owed to the people you meet, you know, along the way somehow, because you're dealing with things which, like you have come across because of some sort of specialist interest or some research that most people don't come across, and which means that you somehow then feel obligated to sort of tell people about them because, you know, some of them are extremely questionable, or some of them are simply, you need to know that they're designed to shut people up in a way, in a very sort of clear way. But yeah, I don't know how to answer it. It just seems to me it's not something I essentially look for. I mean, this trial of Hamdan was also because I know him, he's a friend, and there's not many people who would speak up about it. But then it turned out, and it's kind of interesting because then you have these strange moments. In an asylum tribunal, you don't need to say the oath. So I wasn't under oath. So they asked me, like, who was this radio documentary made for? I said, BBC Radio 4. And it wasn't, but there could be, like, there could be some truth in that. At some point, there was some connection. But the point being that, of course, like, I was also kind of trying to win his case, make them worried about these things. So, I don't know, in a way, I'm not so clear on why it should. I mean, it just seems to me that it should exist in multiple spaces, or at least it can. And I guess the art space is the place which allows it to exist mostly. I mean, it funds it. It sort of like it's interesting. So those are things which I'm really happy about. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Maybe one more question, and then we could open it up. You've written about this moment in the early 80s where the British legal system introduced sound recordings, I guess across the board, for Walt testimonies and so on, which would previously have been transcribed as written form. So then there's this split between the linguistic voice and then the embodied voice. That's you're using those terms, I think. And obviously you can't return to the previous linguistic voice. So I guess my question is, with your petition you were calling for this suspicion, essentially, of the subjective listening. And I wonder if there's any potential for a sort of subjective listening in a legal context. If that makes sense.
If there's any potential for
If you could imagine any potential for a more subjective form of listening.
I mean, the problem is that I really like these forms of listening that exist there. It's not, I mean, I'm attached to them. Also, the work began with this interview with this forensic listener, Peter French, who really, like, in the kind of context of working with sound, really changed a lot of my ways of thinking. And so it was an interview where he would basically just tell me about his work, but one of the things he would tell me is that he would spend like 3 working days on a syllable, you know, on a phoneme, and he would just listen to it. And I thought, like, it's amazing. It's more than any like radical musician ever did, no? Or like any of, you know, these people that I also appreciate. And so from there, this kind of like very radical form of listening made me think that, made me really take it seriously as a kind of process. And also like maybe it's the inspiration also to then enter the legal forum and like speak to it as such and do these kind of press conferences and these kind of courtroom battles. So so really, yeah, it was a big inspiration for me. But essentially, the work he does is horrible. It's and you know also the language he uses. So he'll say, well, you know, we have to identify if there's black influences in his speech, or so things that you would also define in very much this kind of idea of surveillance and bigoted kind of listening and all these kind of things. But he just does it better than anyone else. He just listens better, and something about that really it also inspires me, and also it's a problem. But what I was going to say, yeah. So of course it's subjective listening, and in a way I think that it's not that I object to these forms of listening, as I'm trying to get to. It's actually that they're the moment occupied by the sort of wrong forces, if you like. Like essentially like something that you know, like a form of listening that needs to be reclaimed, and I think that's the problem. The moment that and I think always listening is thought of as some kind of suspicious activity, right? There's always some kind of suspicion attached to listening, like why can we? So yeah, I think I don't know if that's a clear answer, but yeah, I think there is definitely like an emancipatory potential in listening better and listening in the ways that these people listen, but at the moment it's not being used.
Well,
I've got two questions, one for each of you. But following on directly from what you've been talking about, and I suppose within both of your practices, this idea of obviously listening within a co-productive situation, and Lawrence, how you're supposedly inspired as an artist by other authorities or other professionals and their authority that they might have in a courtroom. But listening to how he, or understanding how he listens, it almost approaches a form of listening to abstraction, or perhaps even listening to aesthetics. And I'm wondering, in that sense, I mean, it's obviously clear that you, through this artistic process, are becoming an authority in your own right, I would say. But my question from the start is, how did you present yourself in the courtroom? As an artist?
No.
No.
No, because I wanted him to win his case.
Yeah.
And I think if I say I'm an artist, they'll just not.
No, I know, that's why I'm asking.
I mean, the whole premise of what they try to do with their questions is try to make you a radical. So you also have to play this game of sort of like pretending to be a sort of scientist. And again, because I wasn't under oath, there was a measure in which I could say that I'm doing a PhD on forensic linguistics. And this was my way in. So, but really what I was asked to talk about was, because I'm an Arabic speaker, and I know him very well, and we speak a long time. So one of the ways I was there was as his friend who speaks to him regularly in a dialect, which would then be able to confirm whether he's Syrian or Palestinian, right? And my Arabic's like very incubated as well. So somehow it's because I left. I was born in Jordan, and I left as a child. And my Arabic comes very much from my grandmother. So I speak Arabic like an 86-year-old woman, and so it means that essentially that I'm not in kind of contact with a greater series of dialects. So the claim that he was from these other countries, I could kind of reject, because I said, well, listen, this is, as a kind of non-expert, I'm somehow an expert in this kind of specific form of dialect that he's speaking. So that was one of the line of questions. And then the other was about the company Sprechab and about the radio documentary, which the transcript was submitted to them. So even, I don't know, I mean, there was a CD as well, but I suspect they didn't listen to it. But as I presented myself in this sort of like strange pseudo-scientific way, a bit like this lie detector. I mean, it was really, I wasn't thinking about myself as an artist even in that moment, even if I wanted to record it and do these kind of things. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was quite a simple answer that was necessary. But it says a lot about our practice, I think.
Definitely.
About art practice, did you say, or art practice?
Both at the same time.
I think.
Thanks for listening.
I think if there wasn't this sort of like immediate threat to a guy's life, then I think I would have been more willing to discuss why art is a potentially like field of, like, I don't know, authority or something. But yeah.
Can I pass it around?
You had a question for Charlotte as well.
Yeah, but maybe it's. I will.
You will return to it.
All right.
It might not be the right one.
Are there any other questions?
Not really a question, but more of an observation. I've been researching early speech synthesis, and there's kind of a funny full circle thing gone on with the spectrographs of how they analyse the speech, and I think in the 50s and the mid 50s in the States and the kind of late 50s in Edinburgh, in fact, they were doing experiments with speech synthesis and computers. The one in, I think it was either Harvard or Yale, I forget, I'm sorry, but it's called the pattern playback machine, and they actually managed to get it so that you could, there was a professor who learnt the sort of spectrographs of speech so well that he could draw speech as a kind of visual score and feed it into the machine, and it would talk to him. And I just think it's kind of interesting how it's kind of gone from something kind of so beautiful and positive to something so terrifying and horrible. So that was that, really. And I wanted to ask Charlotte, what synthesizer was it?
It was just a microcool.
A microcool,
Yeah,
okay.
sorry, I'm not really
Very good.
But
And where do you DJ?
I'm hoping to become that. I'm in Glasgow at a club
Oh, okay.
called Nice and Sleazy's.
Oh, okay. Who's next?
I think maybe Will wants the mic back.
If no one else has a question, yeah, then I do have a question for Charlotte. Thank you. Charlotte, I really appreciated your presentation.
Thank you.
And especially for the fact that from the very start you were clearly very precise about the words that you chose.
I had notes.
You kept making gestures to write in the notes as well, but you never did. It struck me that the Coke bottle that's on the table might have been a prop, because halfway through the talk it was still legible what was inside it, and then you finished the drink and we couldn't read anymore that it was Coke. And in that light, I really enjoyed what you were saying about this ability to evolve and adapt our speech within conditions where we're forced not to speak or to be silent, or where we're unable to speak. These very material conditions. you know, where the text disappears or it goes dark or it's light. I think it's clear to me, at least, because, well, it's clear to me that you're maybe even more of an expert than Lawrence is. You could stand up in court for something. And I wanted to ask you about, the thing is, I wrote, a few years ago, I wrote this, I think it's about the idea of the artist as a speculative producer. And I wrote a text whereby I imagined that in 130 years' time, everyone would be wearing Air Max. And it had this very specific relationship to language and products that after a while, and it feels like we might be getting there, and I think even your shoes tonight attest to that better than Air Maxes, because I think Air Force Ones are the least mutated form of sneaker that still exist. And talking about that sneaker or an object as a record of evolution, i.e., it probably isn't such a good record of an evolution of itself because it hasn't evolved, it hasn't adapted, and thereby it necessitates a production of language in order to record that evolution or as a record of its evolution. And either that kids manage to find different ways of tying their laces, you know, in the same way that we find different ways of describing these objects around us. I really liked your response to Fatima's question about this separation. No, actually, I think it was Fatima's question about this separation, this structural separation between language and image, or language and object. And I think it is a speculative question, but I'm wondering if you imagine that being a condition whereby the objects no longer need to evolve, and we're just happily producing language around these objects in order to signal some kind of change or context.
So then it's us that are changing.
Yeah, I think there's this curiosity in relation to what you were saying about the body, in what you were saying about this, because I really appreciated what you said about the head and shoulders, because initially it was going to be a question like, why would you put YouTube videos on a Hunter-X? But it's clear why you've done that, why you've made that decision. But I'm quite unclear about how you imagine a body evolving in relation to this. This situation that we're probably getting ourselves into, even though you're quite optimistic about how our bodies are changing. Does that make any sense as a question? I think it has a lot to do with the evolution of language and what these material conditions produce in terms of the language that we use, which is you can't disassociate from the one from the other. Does that make any sense?
The object from the language.
Because the language is formed by the material conditions that it's pushed through. Sorry, it's a really...
No, but
I'm just...
It's good. I mean, I like what you're saying. I like what you're saying. I don't know if I need to... Do I need to answer it? I don't know. I just... I don't... I like... I mean, I think that's the... I don't think I know the answer. What? Materiality. I think, do you mean, say with Air Force Ones, because they've not evolved, then they're just like the static object, mute. And then their language is being thrown at them, like via the forum, the fetishization, the forums.
In order for them still to be produced and still to be worn by specific people who have a specific...
The market is defined by the language keeps the market keeps the production.
Yeah, but it's not the same kind of market as Air Max,
No.
I would say.
No.
In terms of the language used and why they're produced and who controls that language.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I shouldn't have said that.
No, I like it. I mean, I'm really interested in what you're saying. I just don't know. I just don't think I have an answer. I don't know.
No, maybe it wasn't a question. It's just.
Yeah.
Or I'm trying to squeeze a question out of it, but it needs more time.
Yeah, we can. Maybe that'll come in 6 months. I'll be like, hello, Will. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
I have a question. Shall I answer? Does anyone else have a question? Have a question? I wondered about. I was taken very much by this idea of the throw of the.
Oh yeah.
7, 6,
I saw you
7,
writing
7.
that
And I was wondering also, because you're talking about these kind of sculptural objects and how you worked also with the throw as a form of kind of the sculpture in the space.
Worked with the throw.
Yeah, or was that something you were like, because why that boombox then? You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that boombox because it's really big, and partly because it's really big, and so it's the scale of it worked well with the Hantrax monitors because they're big, and also because it had the state. It's like the Air Force One of boomboxes actually, the Sharp GF777, and it's just like a total classic, and.
No, but why this kind of like not volume, more throw?
Yeah, I don't. You mean why? I was interested in that as an idea. I had read that about it,
okay.
But I don't understand how that works. Like I thought maybe you might understand that. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's bullshit. Maybe it's like a marketing thing, But even if it is, like nonsense, I like the idea of it. That it could be. It's not loud. It's just going like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it is loud. It's very loud, but I guess I just kind of liked it because that idea allowed me to set up this situation where something was, the Hantraxes were just mutely doing their thing, oblivious, because he's not me, because he's someone who's doing his thing in this space, and night classics. And then this kind of boombox is slightly off to the side. So there is this thing about kind of access and denial and entering that space, but then receding from it. And the way I guess the guys, Tom and Jamie, they're the ones that are reciting the tags and, but the things that are to do with my life and my history and my friends, I would always speak because that just felt right. So there's something about being inside and outside and the relationship between these things. And does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know about the throw.
Do we have any further questions? Oh.
I haven't really thought it through, but do you think there's or perhaps put it this way, what are the kind of benefits and drawbacks of being a kind of technology fetishist? This is obviously to Charlotte. In terms of your kind of, and how do you feel about, you've sort of admitted to being slightly technology fetishist, I count myself as one, but I sometimes am criticised for being too obsessed with, like how you're kind of obsessing about the look and the feel and the sort of iconicness of this boombox. Do you find it a problematic relationship?
Yeah, it's kind of, it is very materialistic, which I guess, and
So I think William Revell recently was saying, why does anybody bother using 16mm on a resonance radio show? And there's kind of that thing. I would sort of go from the standpoint, okay, maybe some people use it in a fetishist way, but in fact it's just a another thing in a palette.
Yeah.
With your work, it's much more deliberate than many people who would use 16mm. Some people just would use it as a medium because they think it's the best tool for the job, perhaps.
Yeah. I think, yeah, it's, I mean, you know, I guess that it's obvious. There isn't any relationship between film and video at all. You know, they don't have a relationship at all. Like they're compared in some way because, like people talk about you know, I have those conversations with my dad all the time. He doesn't understand why I'm using 16mm, but HD is better. You know, it's better. There's more, you know, yeah, it's just not, they're different things. So I do, you know, I think that I wouldn't ever I did used to only use 16mm, but now, yeah, it's just, like you say, part of a palette. So if that's the right, I guess because I like to work quite structurally, because that's just how I am. I like to have parameters, and I don't consider myself like a very intuitive kind of maker. So I'm quite like, you know, I like things. So I guess I would use 16mm if I needed to have 100-foot dictated to me, to be dictated by 100-foot. It was really good for that, you know, and I guess not for its romantic qualities, but for its rigidness. That's what I liked about it, its mechanical, cold rigidness. And I was always trying to circumvent the romantic aspect of it. And but it's nice to have a break from it. But I mean, I'm not shooting video now. I might start soon. But I just went straight from using 60mm. I wanted to have a break, and because it's expensive and a nightmare. So then I went just straight to ripping the videos instead, because they had a similar quality, you know, the edges, it was predetermined. I just, you know, take it and put it, like with film. Does that answer the question? And then, yeah, I don't know how much of a technology geek I am, actually. I'm really a technophobe, especially with computers. But I just like the aesthetic of certain, once I'm installing a strip and to put these objects, if I need a speaker, you know, I'm going to use a speaker, then I'll get really into speaker land, I guess. Because
is that not like one place, like being an artist is a place where it's really useful sometimes to be fetishist about technology because I'm rubbish, and I always end up like, you know, like videos like crap because I've not thought about it, and actually like maybe if normally you'd be like people would think it was bad that you were so fetishistic, actually in context of art it's really helpful. It can be really useful thing because, you know, like people appreciate it and they start thinking you know, I'm pretty much finished now, but
yeah.
Is it just a professional norm in relation to the guy that you're also inspired by who sits there?
Yeah.
It's just a relationship to material.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I don't know if that's privilege to artists. I don't agree with that. That it's an artistic privilege or.
oh no, I don't think it's not.
No, she's really, it's useful.
Reaction to him saying that
I asked
Like pathologizing it.
it's a negative thing, people thought it was negative.
Yeah. I mean, I think that if you're having a show, say from a personal perspective, but because my work is very minimal in the space, then everything pops out. And so if I'm going to have, you know, a speaker, I do pay a lot of attention to how the speaker looks because it's right there in the space. And for me to go, ignore the speaker just seems really odd because do you know what I mean? It's like, it's there. And then I guess then off the back of that comes the extreme fetishism. And then I guess it's chicken and egg. Like, I guess if I'm making things really minimal, then that is very fetishistic as well. So, because I think it's because as well I don't generally use dark spaces. So I think with video in a dark space, you know, things generally you want them to be quite invisible, but because I like them to, be seen. in a way. And yeah, there's something about this relationship, like I was talking about the Paleolithic relationship between techniques and language. So I like to play a lot with this, things being on the floor and then things being upright. And I think that's part of the reason why I don't use a dark space. But I think, you know, it's fine as well to be, not to be, you know, obviously.
And what's your relationship with
technology and fetishism in general?
Yeah.
What's my relationship with technology and fetishism in general?
Collecting could be seen as quite fetishistic.
Yeah, I mean, no, I don't know, I had a sort of very stupid idea when you were saying like problematic and materialistic, and I was thinking, well, of course, it's all about like it's materialism, right? And it's about materiality. So, and the world is extremely materialistic, and it would seem strange if then we sort of existed as artists in not this materialistic way. And I think that actually there's something really nice about that. My relationship to it is also very much, it's similar to Charlotte's in the sense that I'm interested in, I think because when you work with sound and you're presented with certain objects, or if you're working with listening in general, you want to really like, you know, you want to make something of the object because you are always trying to get across the idea that it's mediated and it's dirtied by these things, or it's kind of, you know, there's all sorts of forces at work, which is really important for my kind of listeners or people to understand. So in that sense, I want to always kind of expose them, and things like also like cabling and these kinds of things, I think they're really important also to understand the kind of flow of an exhibition space. And, you know, but...
Sorry.
No.
Bless you.
But the Bosch thing was, of course, something really interesting for me. And there was sponsorship from Bosch even for that exhibition. Wow. And the nice thing was, when I came to speak to them, it was very easy because they said, why are you interested in using Bosch? I said, because Bosch is where, you know, what everybody speaks into in these legal international forums, and you see them. And it's the system, it's the kind of, it's the infrastructure of international justice. And they love that, of course, right?
Marketing.
Yeah, so the same reason that I love it is the same reason they love it, is the same reason all the marketing happens. And in fact, the microphones themselves are called delegates, right? So they don't call them microphones, they themselves are delegates. So the whole idea for them that they are, of course, this kind of integral sort of vocal architecture is very known to them, and they practice that. So, you know, again, it's like, it was interesting, and the guy, you know, he comes to the opening, and I don't know, it's kind of funny, you know, so you have this Bosch person as well in the space.
They're little people as well, those microphones, aren't they? They're little bodies themselves.
Yeah.
I know somebody who works with those as an object just because of the look of them as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in a very different way.
The Bosch, yeah.
Because I guess the legal space is profoundly fetishistic in everything from the speech to the robes to the modes of working. So it's you're also working with material where fetishism isn't such a foreign thing.
Yeah, I don't know that it's more fetishistic than anything else. I mean, maybe that's the kind of point of Charlotte, no? Like that actually we exist in this space generally where, like, you know, you see these really strange videos of shoes on the internet being sort of sawn in half. I mean, there's like amazing fetishism everywhere, but yeah, certainly it's around the kind of voice. It becomes this kind of fetishistic object. I think that's the contribution of the project, or what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I think that's it.
Great. Yeah. I think unless there's any final last question, I think we can round it up and go to the pub and continue the conversation there.
Which pub?
Should we go to the George and Dragon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say thank you to speakers and also thank you.
Thank you.
Like you to the rest of the exhibition. And next Thursday we have Sound Dyer's Irene
Thank you.
Thanks.